Untold Lens, real stories, hidden truths. What if I told you a man not only wanted to be eaten, but volunteered for it? No kidnapping, no coercion, just one willing cannibal, and one willing victim. This isn't fiction. This happened, and it's one of the most disturbing true crime stories you've never heard. In early 2001, a man in Germany posted an ad on a now-defunct cannibalism forum. The message was simple and horrifying, looking for a well-built 18 to 30-year-old to be slaughtered and consumed. This wasn't a joke, and as insane as it sounds, someone responded. The man behind the ad was Armin Meiwes, a computer repair technician from Rotenburg, Germany. By all accounts, he was quiet, polite, even friendly. But beneath that calm exterior was a fantasy he had been nurturing since childhood. A desire, not just to eat human flesh, but to find someone who wanted it to happen. And incredibly, he did. The man who replied to Armin Meiwes' chilling online ad was Bernd Brandes, a name that would soon become infamous in one of the most disturbing criminal cases in modern history. Brandes was not just a random responder. He was a man with a story, a life, and a set of desires that most people could never imagine. At 43 years old, Bernd was a successful engineer living in Berlin, a city known for its vibrant culture and progressive attitudes. He was well-educated, respected by his colleagues, and outwardly led a life that seemed perfectly ordinary. To those who knew him casually, he was just another face in the crowd, hard-working, intelligent, and reliable. But beneath this surface, Bernd harbored secrets that he kept hidden from almost everyone. He was known to be introspective, often spending long hours alone reading or working late into the night. Friends described him as thoughtful, even gentle, but also somewhat withdrawn, a man who seemed to carry a quiet sadness. Despite his professional success, Bernd struggled with deep emotional turmoil. He battled feelings of isolation and alienation, and over time, these feelings grew into something darker. He became obsessed with fantasies that most would find unimaginable, fantasies that blurred the line between pain and pleasure, life and death. The internet became his refuge, a place where he could explore the most forbidden corners of his mind. Bernd frequented obscure forums dedicated to extreme fetishes, searching for someone who could understand, and perhaps fulfill, his most secret desires. He wasn't just curious, he was determined to experience the ultimate surrender. For Bernd, this was not a passing fantasy. He spent countless hours online, meticulously planning and discussing the details of what he wanted. He was methodical, almost clinical, in his approach, making it clear that he was not a victim in the traditional sense, but a willing participant in his own fate. In his conversations with Meiwes, Bernd expressed a desire that was as shocking as it was specific. He wanted to be killed and eaten. This was not a cry for help, but a carefully considered wish, one that he pursued with unwavering resolve. In March 2001, Bernd made the fateful decision to leave his life in Berlin behind. He traveled hundreds of kilometers across Germany, carrying with him not just a suitcase, but the weight of his own dark longing. He wasn't going to meet a friend or a lover, he was going to meet his destiny. When Bernd Brandes arrived at Armin Meiwes' isolated home, he knew exactly what awaited him. This was not a random act of violence, but a meticulously planned encounter, one that both men chillingly referred to as the slaughter. On the cold, quiet evening of March 9, 2001, Bernd Brandes made his way through the sleepy streets of Rotenburg, Germany. The air was thick with anticipation and a strange sense of finality as he approached the unassuming home of Armin Meiwes. This was not a chance encounter, but the culmination of weeks of secretive online conversations and a shared, disturbing fantasy. Brandes, a man with a troubled past and a longing for something he could not find in ordinary life, had traveled here with a singular, chilling purpose. Inside the house, the atmosphere was tense and surreal. Meiwes, meticulous and eerily calm, set up his old camcorder to document every moment. The camera's red light blinked in the gloom, capturing the unfolding events in grainy detail. The tape that would result from this night would become infamous, so graphic and disturbing that authorities would never allow it to be seen by the public. It was a record of a night that blurred the line between reality and nightmare. As the camera rolled, Brandes sat at the kitchen table, his nerves visible in every movement. He took a handful of sleeping pills, washing them down with strong schnapps. The alcohol burned, but it was nothing compared to the anticipation and fear that filled the room. The pills were meant to dull the pain of what was to come, to make the experience bearable, if only for a little while. The two men exchanged few words, their silence heavy with the knowledge of what they were about to do. The dining room, lit only by the flicker of candles, felt more like a stage than a home. Every movement was deliberate, every glance loaded with meaning. In a moment that was both surreal and terrifying, Meiwes began to fulfill the first part of Brandis's twisted request. The boundaries between victim and willing participant blurred, as the two men enacted a plan that defied comprehension. The air was thick with dread, but also with a strange, almost ritualistic calm. Incredibly, they even attempted to share a meal, one that included a part of Brandis himself. The act was both grotesque and intimate, a final, desperate attempt to connect in a way that no one else could understand. The kitchen, once a place of comfort, was now transformed into a scene of horror. The two men sat across from each other, the silence broken only by the clink of cutlery and the occasional strained conversation. It was a moment suspended in time, both shocking and deeply sad. But the reality of what they had done soon became unbearable. The pain, both physical and emotional, overwhelmed Brandes. He writhed in agony, clutching his abdomen, his face twisted in distress. The effects of the pills and alcohol were not enough to numb the suffering. Meiwes watched, torn between compassion and the dark compulsion that had brought them together. The hours dragged on, each minute more excruciating than the last. As the night wore on, Brandes began to lose consciousness, his strength fading with every passing moment. Blood pooled on the cold kitchen tiles, a silent testament to the horror that had unfolded. In his final moments of lucidity, Brandes pleaded with Meiwes to end his suffering. Hours later, after a long and agonizing wait, Meiwes finally granted his request. The house fell silent, forever marked by the events of that night, a night that would haunt both men and the world for years to come. For months, no one knew what had happened, until Meiwes posted again, looking for a new volunteer. This time, someone alerted the authorities. When police raided his home, they found frozen body parts labeled steak, rump, and fillet. And on his computer, the chilling footage that proved everything. In 2004, the small German town of Kassel became the center of a media storm as Armin Meiwes, a computer technician with no prior criminal record, was put on trial for a crime that would challenge the very foundations of German law and ethics. The world watched in disbelief as the details of the case emerged, revealing a story so bizarre and unsettling that it seemed almost unbelievable. The legal question at the heart of the trial was, in many ways, unprecedented. Meiwes had not simply killed his victim, he had done so with the victim's explicit written consent. This forced the court to grapple with a dilemma. Could an act still be considered murder if the person who died had agreed to their own death? The case blurred the lines between legality and morality, and the entire nation was captivated by the debate. The prosecution argued that consent could never justify such an act, while the defense insisted that Meiwes was not a murderer, but a man fulfilling a mutual agreement. The jury listened intently as both sides presented their arguments, aware that their decision would set a precedent for future cases involving consent and criminal responsibility. In the end, the court initially convicted Meiwes of manslaughter, sentencing him to 8.5 years in prison. The verdict sparked intense debate across Germany and beyond, with many questioning whether justice had truly been served. The courtroom was filled with a mix of relief, confusion, and outrage as the sentence was read. The public reaction was swift and passionate. Protests erupted outside the courthouse, and the case dominated headlines around the world. Many felt that the sentence was too lenient for such a shocking crime, and the pressure mounted for the courts to reconsider. The debate reached the highest levels of government and law, prompting a retrial in 2006. At the retrial, the court ultimately found Meiwes guilty of murder, sentencing him to life in prison. Today, he remains behind bars, his case continuing to provoke discussion about the limits of consent, the nature of justice, and the complexities of human behavior. The trial that shook Germany left a lasting mark on the country's legal and cultural landscape. The story became an international sensation. It inspired horror films, books, even songs. Many dismissed it as the work of a madman, but others asked, what drives a person to not just kill, but to willingly become a meal? Psychologists later diagnosed Meiwes with schizoid personality disorder, but the internet also played a role. In hidden corners of the web, niche communities normalized extreme desires. When someone desperate enough stumbled across the wrong post, it turned fantasy into a horrifying reality. Should a person be allowed to consent to their own death? Should we draw a legal line, even in consensual acts? This case forced Germany, and honestly, the world, to rethink its laws. Today, it remains a landmark example in debates around bodily autonomy, mental health, and criminal law. Over 20 years later, people still ask, was this evil, mental illness, or just two broken people, meeting at the worst possible moment? Armin Meiwes wanted to live out a fantasy, and Baron Brandes wanted to disappear forever. Together, they made it happen, and history will never forget the man who paid to be eaten. Some stories are too strange to be fiction, and too disturbing to ignore. This was one of them. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real stories from the shadows.